What's up, hippies? Hope you're having a vibey day today. Coming at you with a long-anticipated video. Yuki, what were we talking about today?
Today, the wait is over. We are unveiling our drug tier list for 2024. This is one that Reggie and I have been thinking about for a while. And this year, we wanted to wait until close to the end of the year to record this episode because we wanted to give ourselves, a full year of experiences with all these substances. And if you watched last year's tier list, we do have some shakeups in the substances this year. We've added a couple new ones. We've had some tiers change, and we're really excited to dive in and talk about why some of those have changed, why some have stayed the same, and really be able to color those with another year of experience, another year of doing drugs and growing up and learning more about these substances. Some of them wonderful and magical, some of them absolutely awful and heinous. And so today we're going to run through that entire gamut of drugs with you guys.
This is Modern Day Hippie. We are your homies who've done nearly every drug under the sun. Over 600 psychedelic trips and nearly every kind of bender you can possibly imagine have armed us with a universe of knowledge. I'm Yuki, and with my co-host Reggie, we talk about how we do drugs in a responsible, safe, and fun way to improve our lives. Before we dive in, and so we don't get sued, a quick legal disclaimer.
This podcast is for educational and informational purposes only. Our goal is to educate and inform others about the realities of substance use in an engaging and entertaining format. We share these experiences so you can learn from them without trying them yourself. By listening to this podcast, you agree not to attempt to recreate anything found in this episode or in any of our other content. We are not confessing to any acts stated in this podcast. The content in this episode should not be treated as factual or real in any way.
With that, we welcome you through our portal and hope you enjoy the show.
So, ready to get into it?
Yeah. Let's do this.
All right. So starting off with substance number one here, we're talking about alcohol. Reggie, tell me we got alcohol this year, man.
Man, everyone's favorite party drug in America, apparently, but not to the modern day hippies, if I'm being real. Alcohol is D tier this year.
Hell yeah. It is in D tier, which is one tier lower than we had it last year. Reason for this is, first off, you guys know how I feel about alcohol on the show. It's super common. It's freaking everywhere. Everybody does it. And alcohol in and of itself is by no means the worst drug out there. But we just think there are so many better options out there in the modern day. Hence why we have it in D tier. And the reason that I moved it down from C last year is because as I've continued to drink absolutely no alcohol, I've continued to feel just my life getting better. I feel healthier. I don't get crazy hangovers. And I've also had the good fortune to meet and party with a lot more people who either don't drink or even the ones who do drink are way more reasonable about it. And they might drink, like one or two beers over the course of a night while they're doing other substances. And I think that's totally fine. That's totally reasonable. That's not how I go about things, but I think that's like a perfectly healthy relationship to have with alcohol.
Yeah, man. And on my end, I've just witnessed a lot of coworkers who were kind of struggling with alcohol addiction. And I didn't realize how common it is, even amongst people who seem like they have their shit together. These are fully functioning adults with big boy jobs and shit. And it's a freaking struggle, man. A lot of people are just joining the movement of just not drinking anymore, at all. And, for that reason, I think D is a good place for alcohol. It's you really don't need it.
And funny enough, I was just reminded of a time when I was in college and I was talking to this recruiter at some big name tech company that I wanted to work for. And the recruiter was telling me that he actually drank more in his first 2 years after college than any time he was in college. And he also partied. And it just made me a little bit sad to hear, even at the time when I was drinking, that damn, even in adult life, some people are just drinking absolute just buckets of alcohol.
Dude, it's bad, bro. It's so accessible, and there's a culture around it, and it seems like everyone's doing it, and the health effects of alcohol, especially long term, are so bad. And you just I don't know, working in the corporate world and watching people get older and realizing the shit that they start getting diagnosed with and stuff, and a lot of it's related to their alcohol use. I'm man, alcohol is just so not worth it compared to the other options that we're about to talk about. So
amen to that, Reggie. All right, so next up on our list we have Delta 8. This one we put in the C tier. Reggie, you want to give us a quick rundown?
Yeah, so when we say Delta 8, we're not just talking about Delta 8, but also the other related cannabinoids like Delta 10 and THCO or whatever you find at like the smoke shops or gas stations or whatever. You know, we put it in C tier because it's like, it's really easily accessible. Like most people can get it, even if you're in a state where it's not legal to have like Delta 9 THC or like regular weed or whatever. And so convenience factor, pricing is decent, and it's, you know, it still gets you high. Like it gets the job done. Like I wouldn't say it gets it done as well as like regular weed, but like for what it is, I think like it's a step in the right direction for people who like to smoke like that. And it's not like super addictive or anything like that. So, and it's not as damaging as like alcohol, at least not that we know of right now. I guess there haven't been too many long-term studies on that, but
yeah, fair. And it's funny because even in my pretty limited Delta 8 experience, I feel like the high just isn't quite as good. Like you feel kind of high, but it's not the same. It doesn't feel as thorough or as intense or fun. It's just kind of like light.
It is light, and sometimes that's what you're looking for, you know? Like
True.
There's a lot of times where like when I like was smoking more heavily, where I'd prefer to rip a Delta pen because I knew that I'd be okay. You know what I mean? Versus like if I hit like a regular dab pen, like it would just fuck me up too much for what I was trying to do.
Yeah, true. I hear you. It has its time and its place. So I think that makes sense.
Yeah. So speaking of dabs, next up we've got dabs, like weed dabs on our list. And we've got those also in C tier. And I feel like that's really just because they're great. They get you high. They're relatively cheap if you source them properly, I guess. But they'll just fuck you up too much, man. They just fuck you up too much to be up in like a B tier even, in my opinion. Like you just cannot do dabs like super regularly unless you have a crazy high tolerance, in which case you should probably like calm the fuck down. You know what I mean? You just can't do dabs regularly like that. And at least the criteria I was looking at for ranking these drugs was like, it's got to be something that can fit into a lifestyle. Like dabs, in my opinion, like you can do them at a party, you can do them with friends every once in a while, but it's not a lifestyle thing. So C tier.
Yeah, man. And the cases where I have seen it be a lifestyle thing, it's like you're too much of a mega stoner, and that's all that will get you high. And like if you get to that point, you're smoking a lot. And I definitely knew some people who were like that back in college. Since then, honestly, I don't think I have even seen a dab around me since college. It's been a fucking while.
Really?
And maybe part of that is definitely the people I hang out with, but like still, it's like, I don't know, it feels like a distant memory for me.
I feel that. Honestly, I have dabs, but like I only really smoke them if I like run out of weed and I just like really want to get high or have friends over or something like that. I'm just like, okay, fuck it, why not? But I almost always regret it if I do it, especially if I do it kind of casually, because I'm like, okay, I'm way too fucking stoned. Like even if I just want to like smoke a little bit before I work out, like if I hit a dab and then go try to lift, like the lift is just on hard mode, bro. You know what I mean? Like, why would I do that to myself versus like if I was just smoking bud? But anyways, we'll get to bud soon.
Yeah, fair. But in the meantime, we've got weed edibles. This one we have in the B tier, which is also the same as last year. And I know for me with weed edibles, as someone who's not the biggest fan of weed, I've learned how to utilize them properly when I do want to take them. And I've just learned that the two biggest factors are the dosage and patience and just waiting for it to come up. And I've had enough enjoyable experiences with weed edibles where I'm like, okay, I feel strongly that this is like a decent B tier. Like it can be fun, can be a good time as long as you know what you're getting yourself into. And I found it's also just important to be comfortable enough with it to kind of like ride out that high because it does last a while. And that's kind of my major ding against weed edibles.
Yeah. They also are better for your health than smoking. Like if like you're someone who is sensitive to smoke or something like that, then you'll be able to do weed edibles and you probably wouldn't want to be like sparking a blunt, you know?
Yeah, true.
But yeah, I think B tier is appropriate.
Yeah, agreed. Sweet. Next up on the list, we have a personal favorite of mine, Tusi, also known as kitchen sink Tusi or pink cocaine. You guys, if you've been watching our channel for a while, you probably know about this one. And this year we have in the A tier, which is one level up from last year where we had it in the B tier. And this one, honestly, we went back and forth on a little bit, but ultimately it's just such a fun fucking drug, man. Like it's such a good time. It's so versatile. Like you can take it in any context. I've taken it from the middle of a rave or at Burning Man to literally just vibing with friends like on the river or hanging out around a kitchen island for late night and just having the most deep and wonderful conversations. And I feel like depending on the context, my brain is able to focus on which of the subsequent parts of the Tusi mixture is actually most conducive to the situation. So whether that's the ketamine, whether that's MDMA, or the little bit of LSD, it's just a wonderful substance. I will heavily qualify this with, you do need to be careful with it. So the biggest components, as you guys should know by now, are ketamine and MDMA. And both of those run their own risks. And so 2C is ideally not something you're doing too often. And when you do it in small quantities. But otherwise, as long as you're aware of the ramifications of it, it's just such a good time. Like I had to put an amen.
Yeah, it's a vibe. I agree with everything you said, especially like if you're able to like design your own custom batch or something, like that's kind of what brings it up to A tier for me. Just like being able to like have a personalized drug experience, you know? But yeah, definitely be careful with it.
Yeah, totally agree.
So next up, we've got every stoner's favorite, weed, just regular weed. You know, I was really back and forth on where to put it, but I think ultimately it lands in B tier. And the only reason it's not higher is because you just, as great as weed is, like you just are not super like functional on it necessarily. Like it gives you the munchies, like some of like the effects are just like not conducive to like the kind of lifestyle that like we're trying to live and we're trying to promote here at Modern Day Hippie. It's also like, I've seen too many people just kind of get too into it, including myself at times, where you just end up doing it too often and like you're just not really as productive of a person. It has some long-term effects studies are showing where it can like affect memory and stuff like that. And especially if you're young, I definitely don't think you should be smoking too much weed. Like, and when I say young, I mean like your brain's not fully developed, like you're less than 25 and stuff. So yeah, I don't know. It's got to be a B tier. I love weed, don't get me wrong, but it's not really the lifestyle drug that some of these other drugs can be. And when I say that, I mean like we're like at like in Modern Day Hippie, like we're not trying to promote like a lot of drug use, right? Like we're trying to promote responsible drug use. And that means that like something that you could abuse easily, like weed, it's got to just be kicked down a notch compared to something else that you would only be doing a little bit less often or a little bit more on an occasion, which is kind of like what we're trying to suggest is a better way to utilize drugs as a tool, you know, not as like something that you're dependent on or anything.
Yeah, absolutely. Well said. And weed is definitely one that can sneak up on you without you realizing it. And yeah, I mean, we've seen it happen, and you got to be careful with it. It can be a good time, but it's easy to go from using it with intentionality or intention to just kind of being like, oh, I'm bored, let's get high.
Yeah, like, you know, they say nobody starts by, you know, smoking every day, right? Like, or nobody starts by drinking whiskey every day or whatever it is. Like with addiction, it's like, you know, maybe you start like just at parties, then like you just do it on the weekends, then you start doing it like a couple of times a week. And that's how people end up getting addicted. I've just seen it way too many times with weed. So B tier is still pretty good, I think.
Yeah,
it's just not an A tier.
Agreed. Sweet. And then coming up next, we have MDMA, which we've also bundled together with like ecstasy pressed pills, or whether you take MDMA crystals or ecstasy pills. We have this in A tier, which is one level up from last year. And honestly, the biggest reason for the move up with MDMA is, dude, I've seen and heard like how this substance can actually change lives. So whether you're looking at like this year was the year that we were pretty sure that the FDA was going to approve the usage of MDMA at the federal level to treat veterans with PTSD. So that was by this startup called Lykos Therapeutics, which is a spin out of MAPS, which is the nonprofit that researches psychedelics. And it didn't get approved in the phase 3 trials, which is super unfortunate, but there was still a ton of promising data that came out of that. And Lykos will still keep pushing for that federal like regulation that they would be able to use it. And this can really be a wonder drug if used in the right ways. And then I've also seen in my personal life, I mean, I have seen MDMA bring out sides of my friends that I had never seen before, that I never knew existed, in really beautiful, incredible ways. Like really brings them joy and happiness and a sense of connection that they've never been able to experience otherwise. And I've literally seen it have subtle, but I think profound changes on some of the people around me. And I've really come to appreciate it for that reason. With that said, I think we all know the drawbacks of MDMA, that you really shouldn't do it too often. It will really affect your serotonin, your brain chemistry, and you need to be careful about not doing it more than ideally a couple of times a year, giving yourself a couple months breaks in between. But it is increasingly becoming, I think, a drug that is showing a lot of promise for so many conditions that people have with mental health disorders and whatnot.
Yeah, totally agree, honestly. My mind's changed a little bit on MDMA since last year. And I've also seen people use it properly, I feel like, and gain those valuable experiences and even connect with other people like on levels that they didn't think they could connect with them. So I think if you're using it responsibly, it's definitely an A tier.
Yeah, agreed. Nice. Next up, we have 5-MeO DMT.
Yeah, so this one moved up this year and we're putting it in the S tier.
All the way, baby. First S tier on the list.
Yes, sir. And honestly, it's just because of how powerful it is with what it can do for someone's like mental health, their self-reflection. I've just talked to a bunch of people and we've done some episodes on this that have just done DMT trips. And when we say 5-MeO DMT, that's like the DMT everyone thinks of when you say DMT, right? Like classic DMT. Just so many people that I've talked to have like had profound experiences. Like there was this guy that I was talking to at the gym who like did DMT and then realized that he was treating his mom wrong and like fixed his whole relationship with his mom afterwards. And I also recently learned that there apparently you don't actually develop a tolerance towards DMT, like unlike shrooms and LSD and stuff like that, which I thought was just really cool. Like it also doesn't like have a cross tolerance with those other psychedelics. So there's a lot that we don't know about it, but I think just because of how powerful it is and like using it as a tool, it's an S tier for sure.
Yeah, man. And honestly, for me, 2024 was the year where I had some proper DMT experiences for the first time. I went to a couple of festivals where friends brought DMT pens, and it was just wonderful experiences. And I also found that with most pens, you do have to kind of commit to like inhaling it and hold it in to really get the effect. And I've found that I have a lot of appreciation for drugs that are easy to not overdo because it makes it harder to have an experience that's like stronger than what you feel like you signed up for. And the experiences I have had on DMT, like the actual trip itself is pretty short, but it's so beautiful. It gives me so much just gratitude and love for frankly everything. And then the afterglow after DMT is honestly like unparalleled. Like even after the trip is over, I just have this lingering sense of just gratitude and positivity. And literally it's like one of my favorite feelings. It's absolutely beautiful.
Yeah. I think the DMT pen's a game changer for sure. I feel like for me, like it's a lot easier to break through like using like a bong, right? It's like a lot harsher, obviously, but yeah, I feel like those DMT pens definitely like take DMT to another level of accessibility and being able to dose it, like what you're saying, like dosing it to have the right experience that you want, like having that control over it is just, game changer.
Yeah, I agree. Nice. Next up on the list, we have ketamine. This is one that was pretty highly contested. Ultimately, we decided to put it in the B tier, which is one level lower than last year. We had an A. And this one, I really thought about pretty long and hard because, to be honest, ketamine has been my new favorite drug in 2024. I have absolutely just adored ketamine. I've had so many positive experiences with it. But a couple episodes ago, we talked about how ketamine is the drug that I've seen in the people around me, which is very much kind of like rave groups and burners. Ketamine is the drug that I think has the highest potential for people to get addicted to and have pretty negative outcomes with in their life. And like we mentioned for weed, ketamine is one of those things that can really sneak up on you. And with ketamine, it's because the tolerance builds up so quickly and you need to do exponentially more of it to get close to the same feelings. And if you don't give yourself a break, you're just going to keep doing more and more. And it can have pretty negative effects on your bladder. Like, I know I am not, I would say, a heavy ketamine user compared to some people I know, but like I get like bladder cramps and bladder pain sometimes from it. And that shit can be kind of scary. And it's a good reminder to take breaks. And it's just so much fun, man. Like it's truly fun. Like from a fun perspective, like for me, it is one of the best, but I think the ramifications are too much. And it's just something you have to be so careful of it. And this definitely has hit home for me this year as I've seen it kind of start to take hold on some friends of mine. And they've really had to have honest conversations with themselves and take a step back from ketamine and from partying to keep themselves healthy, honestly.
Yeah, that rave drug episode we did on ketamine, like it really changed my perspective on it because I did not realize how bad some of those side effects can get.
Yeah, no, it can be serious, and it doesn't feel serious when you're doing it at first. Like you really don't need that much ketamine when you're starting out to feel a lot, but it slowly ramps up and you kind of lose track of like how much you do now versus how much you used to do. And yeah, it's just be careful, guys. It's a fun one, but just watch out. Hence, be here.
Next up, we have LSD. And, you know, I thought a lot about this and had to land it in the S tier, dude. Like, it was A tier last year, but it just had to move up, man. I appreciate LSD too much, like, as a tool for self-reflection, just for like even just having a good time. Like, it's very versatile. And it lasts a long time. It's easy to transport. It's easy to hide. It's cheap. Like, there's just so many reasons. I feel like it's got to just be an S tier.
Yeah, man. And the reason I wanted to move this up from A to S this year was because I've had a couple more LSD experiences this year than I did last year. And they were just so clean and pleasant. Like even when I'm like peak tripping, I still just feel very in control of my faculties. And it reminded me of this quote that I shared on the podcast long ago. And it's that when you take mushrooms, it puts you in the passenger seat. When you take LSD, you're in the driver's seat. And the things I've been able to do on LSD are pretty normal. I'm able to function normally on it, but still have a really pleasant time. And again, this is also part of because I'm around people who do LSD more often, and they've shown me kind of how to like dose it over multiple days and like maintain a good time. And that's just shown me that this drug like can be really magical, and in the right space and the right time, it is truly one of the best substances that I think exists on this earth.
It's great. I think last year we had it in A because of like how long it lasts and stuff. So like you couldn't really plan, like you had to really do a lot of planning for your trips. But I feel like that doesn't even matter anymore. Like, because we were comparing it to like shrooms and Forico and stuff. But I don't know, man. It's a different trip. It's not really fair, I feel like, to compare it like that anymore just based on the timing and stuff. Because the feeling you get, like you said, is different. And I've just been appreciating the LSD feeling a lot more recently.
Yeah,
well.
I hear you, man. Likewise. Sweet. And next up on the list, we have UCB. This is a special one for me, honestly. Obviously, it has the confusion aspects and kind of overlap with pink cocaine, Tusi, but UCB is its own substance. And I've been a little bit more exposed to it this year, and I've really come to enjoy and appreciate it. And so for that reason, I put it in the S tier. And the main reason being that when you get real 2CB, it's so potent and just such a pleasant trip. I found that in pressed pills, it tends to be pretty subtle, but it's a really nice, just consistent vibe. And then if you do any other substances with it, it immediately like brings it up and immediately has like these really positive overlapping effects. And then I got to try some actual 2CB powder this year. And man, like I needed the smallest amount to have like a pretty intense, pretty fun trip. And it was like barely any bit of powder, which is really good because as I've found myself kind of doing more nose drugs, I've come to appreciate things that it's like I don't have to snort that much of, get a good feeling out of it. And then it also acts on different receptors in your brain from things like MDMA. And since it's like squarely in the psychedelics category, it has way less negative downsides than actually snorting things like pink cocaine or taking MDMA and stuff like that. So it's just a lot of benefits, a lot of fun with very little downside.
Yeah, I need to try that powder stuff, man. Because I feel you with the pressed pill being subtle. Like, and I did appreciate like the pressed pills I did for 2CB. But yeah.
Yeah, the powder's a good.
It's a vibe for sure.
Yeah, it is. I will hook it up the next time I see you.
Sweet.
All right.
All right. Next up, we've got raw mushrooms. And this year, they actually went down a little bit to A tier. We had them in S tier last year, you know, justifiably so. Mushrooms are great. They're like the go-to. But I think when we're like comparing them to all the other drugs, some of the kind of effects of just eating the raw mushrooms, especially if you're not going to like make a tea or something like that, people can, you know, react a bit adversely to it. I've seen a few people who like just haven't really had great trips because of like the stomach issues and stuff like that. So just because of, those reasons, and it's just got to be an A tier for me. I don't know.
Yeah, no, I agree, mostly because I've had quite a few mushroom trips this year that were not amazing. Like they were fine, they were decent, but there were times when they just made me feel really tired or sleepy or just like not super happy. And part of me thinks that's just like what I needed out of those trips and what I needed at the time, and that's okay. But it's something that I've found myself slowly gravitating away from as I found kind of some other psychedelics, especially that I can have more fun with. And I feel like can give me a more consistently good, happy, and still insightful time.
Yeah, I think the consistency here is key to why we knocked it down. It's a lot harder to dose raw mushrooms because you don't always know exactly what kind of mushrooms you have. You don't know what the psilocybin content's going to be. So, you're taking a chance every time you do it. And, different types of mushrooms will have different effects. So like if you're trying to like have use mushrooms as a tool for something specific, then you need it's a lot harder to gauge unless you're growing it yourself or like you like measure the psilocybin somehow. It's a lot harder to gauge what kind of experience you're going to have and plan for it if that's what you're trying to do. So yeah, great drug. I love mushrooms. Don't get me wrong. Just not as reliable, I'd say.
Yeah, agreed. And next we have 4-ACO DMT. You want to tell us about this one, Reggie?
Yeah, so this is one of my personal favorites. It's got to be S tier. I stand by it. We talked about it a bit, but it's just like mushrooms, but without all the downside. It's like perfectly dosed. You know exactly what you're going to be getting. You know exactly how it's going to affect you. It's going to be consistent, and you're not going to get any of those weird stomach issues and stuff like that from eating the raw mushrooms. It just feels like a cleaner trip, a little bit more intense, a little bit shorter, which just makes it more manageable. And it scales really well. Like, you only need a little bit more to trip a lot harder, which I really appreciate when it comes to the drugs, especially like, I don't know, it's the volume thing too, right? You don't want to be consuming like heavy volumes of things. So yeah, S tier. Like we did a whole episode on 4-ACO if you'll want to check it out, learn more about it if you don't know what we're talking about. But 4-ACO DMT, 4-ACO DMT, whatever you call it, S tier for me for sure.
Absolutely. I love it, man. Next up, we have MDA, also known as SAS. This is a new one to the list this year. And this is a substance I've gotten a little bit more exposed to in 2024. And I've put it pretty squarely in the B tier. So this is a little bit lower than, traditional MDMA. And the reason for this being, and honestly, the differences between the two substances, the best way I've heard it described is with MDMA, the lovey-dovey feeling you get is very much like it's like you and your group. Whereas MDA, it's kind of like a little bit more like selfish. It's more of like a me. It's like, oh, I'm great and I feel good. And it's still very fun, but it really misses out on that like group love experience, that really like that human connection, that empathy that I think makes MDMA so magical and A tier for me. And MDA can still be super fun, but not to the same extent. And I was also doing some research and found that it can be a little bit more neurotoxic than MDMA. And so while still fun, it's not something I would recommend on a regular basis. And so I put it in a B tier. It can be fun. Similar qualifiers as MDMA. Don't do it frequently. Don't abuse it. It can be fun, but not quite as exciting to me as MDMA.
Yeah, I haven't tried that one yet. I gotta try it, but honestly, like I'm not really in a rush to try it. Like it doesn't sound like something that I really care too much to experience, but willing to give it a shot one day.
Yeah, no, I think that's the right perspective.
All right, next up we've got cocaine.
Classic.
Yeah, classic. We had to put that one in the D tier, which is the same place we put it last year. It's a powder drug. You kind of have to snort high volumes of it, or you end up snorting high volumes of it, which is just bad for your nose. It can be cut with things, which is dangerous. Always test your shit if you're doing coke. And it's just like kind of a sus drug, and it doesn't give you that much. Dude, it doesn't give you that great of an experience.
Yeah, no, I've actually heard this phrase several times this year from totally different independent people. And it's that coke is a low vibration drug. And I agree, man. It's very fiendy. I feel like it pairs well with alcohol, which also is also in the D tier and also not great. And I had my cookie phase. It was fun for a little while, but it's just such a fiendy substance. And even when I was doing it, even when I was going through my coke phase, I didn't enjoy it. I would do more and I would feel like shit. It would just make me jittery and sweaty and a little bit nauseous. And I did enjoy it, but it's like I was still doing more. And I was like, all right, this
I don't like the person that I became when I was doing a lot of coke. You know, I was kind of an asshole. Like, and I fucking hate that. And when I was looking at like ranking all these drugs with you and everything, I was really thinking like, I don't want, like, if a drug is going to compel me to act in a certain way that's not in my control, that I don't like, that's not like a positive thing, then that's like a really bad characteristic of that drug for me. Cocaine's definitely one of those. Weed to an extent is there with like the munchies and stuff like that. Some of these other drugs that we talk about have some of those effects on people. Like, I don't know, like, why would you want to take something that's kind of just make you a worse version of yourself, have bad effects on your health? Like, and it's, yeah.
No, totally.
And it just like has a high risk of like being cut with things.
Yeah,
like,
exactly.
Of all the drugs, you know?
Yeah. Literally the highest risk of being cut with some really bad shit that could actually kill you. So be careful with that. And then the last thing I will add is I feel like the D tier this year has kind of, at least for me, become the tier of drugs that can be used as tools, but in a very narrow band of circumstances. Like alcohol, I think there's a very narrow band of experiences or settings where you drink a little bit and it acts as the social lubricant, as people say, and can make you open up and be more social and whatever. I'm like, okay, great. If you take a little bit, you don't want to stop. Sure. Coke, honestly, similarly, I've gained a little bit more grace for it because I have quite a few friends now who work in like event productions and they're up super late, and like, you know, whether they're music performers, whether they're like the supporting crew, like running lights, lasers, whatever. Like sometimes these people just need to be up late. And no matter how tired they are, they need to find a way to be up late. And the go-tos are cocaine and nicotine. Again, that is a very niche experience where it could be useful, but you got to be really fucking careful with it because otherwise it's going to get way out.
Yeah, agreed for sure.
All right. What do we got next, Reggie?
Next, we got fentanyl. So this is new this year. We didn't have it on the list last year. And part of that is just the fentanyl crisis is getting fucking ridiculous in the US. Like, and I'm sure in other parts of the world too, but it's bad, man. Like looking at these streets out here, like people will be fucking zombies and shit. There's so many more zombies on the street than I've ever seen in my life. And it really fucking makes me sad. So fentanyl ended up like in the double F tier, like off the list, bro. It's like worse than F tier. It wasn't even fair to put other drugs in F tier because fentanyl was there. So we had to like literally put it on its own fucking category of bullshit. Like it's just sad, you know, like I guess it's just sad what it's doing to society. You know, it can kill you super easily. You know, one of our guests that we had on the pod, recently talked about how like he got addicted to it for a while, had to check himself into rehab. It's like just so easy to just like lose yourself to that drug, and it's so cheap and available for people, which is just like, I have no idea how we got here as a society. Honestly, it's just fucked up.
Yeah. And the other fuck thing that I found about it is I feel like a significant portion of the fentanyl deaths come from people who don't even know they're taking it. It's, you know, often used to cut cocaine, potentially other substances. And I mean, that's messed up. Like it's one thing to like take it knowingly, and it's another thing entirely to not know what you're taking and have that affect your life. Like, yeah.
Fentanyl is the reason that a lot of these other drugs are lower on the list because people are cutting them with fentanyl. You know what I mean? And like just that risk alone makes those other drugs lower. And I mean, if you look at the picture we have for fentanyl on here, that's a pencil tip. Apparently that's all the fentanyl you need to die from fentanyl, to like overdose off of it and die. Like that small little amount. So you could see how people are like easily just overdoing that shit, you know, like by accident, especially if they don't know what it is.
Yeah. And now you have these even crazier derivatives of it. You have things, I think it's cat fentanyl, which is literally 10 times more potent than that.
Are you for real? I didn't even hear about that.
Yeah, it's either cat fentanyl or car fentanyl, one of those two, but it's bad, man. It's bad out there. And hence this is double F. This is extreme no-go. We don't like it. We wish it didn't exist. And
I mean, they do actually use it in like hospitals and shit. Like it's like a real drug that like you can like be prescribed for surgeries or whatever. But like, I wish it didn't exist on the streets, man.
Yeah, no, dude. And the thing about that, like I have gotten fentanyl through an IV drip once. Like I was in a pretty bad accident and they used it for pain. Like in the time it took them to get me to the ER. And honestly, I don't even feel like it freaking helped that much. Like
honestly, like
I was like,
those kinds of drugs usually like it depends who you ask. It's mixed evidence on the way that they actually work when it comes to pain management. Like opiates in general, also it's mixed evidence. We'll get to opiates on the list, but that's why like ketamine became more popular and stuff, because it's like it works in a different way to treat some of the same things, or possibly some of the same things.
Yeah.
But anyways, next up,
we've got heroin. This one is sitting squarely in our F tier, same as last year. This is just one of those drugs that really can ruin your life. Actually, I have a family member who it did largely ruin his life for several years. Now I believe he's gotten out of it, but it's ugly. And actually earlier this year, I went back down the rabbit hole of years ago. There was this guy who made a post on Reddit who was like, I'm a totally normal guy. I've never really done hard drugs. Like I've smoked some weed and I'm just curious. I just want to try heroin. I just want to see how it feels and then I'll never do it again. And people in the comments were like, don't do it. And this guy ended up getting super addicted. And there's a series of threads from him over the years where it's like he becomes like super addicted and then he goes to rehab and he's trying to rebuild his life after that. But it's just like super fucked. And I've just heard of ways how like, even if you go through rehab and you recover, like it morphs the, like the pleasure center of your brain so much that it's like, you are unable to feel happiness or joy or pleasure in anything remotely close to the same way as you were able to without heroin. So this is an awful drug. This is another no-go.
It's also a street drug. So like, unlike pure opioids, like heroin can be cut and often is cut with bullshit. And especially if you're like using needles or something, like that's just a recipe for disaster, dude. Like, like it's so dumb. Like don't do it, And it's really sad. A lot of people who turn to heroin, like they got addicted to opioids because they were prescribed them and then their prescription stopped and like they were so desperate they would like find street heroin and like that's part of what makes it so bad is because like people are desperate and they'll just put whatever in their body and like it's not the same thing as the prescription. Not that the opioids are much better, but like they are cleaner at least they're like, regulated. Like heroin is just like a bad idea. So stay away from that shit.
Yeah, man. And honestly, anything involving needles, I'm like, nah, no thanks. As soon as I see a needle.
I mean, there's other ways to do it, but
yes, agreed.
Definitely not worth it.
Yeah.
Which brings us to our next drug, which is meth. Similar story here. Street drug. Honestly, always cut with shit. It's made with like battery acid and shit like that. Like it's made with some bullshit, dude. Like you don't want to be doing this. It's super fucking bad for you. It smells and tastes disgusting. It's extremely, extremely addictive. Like a lot more addictive than coke, like a lot more addictive than I think anything on our entire list, actually. It's like when it comes to like the dopamine response, like it gives you the highest dopamine response out of everything on the list, I think. And it's just like, so like it'll just fry your brain, bro. Like I've seen people like just become fiends and they turn into different people and they're not themselves. And I'm gonna be honest, like I've tried it before. And I absolutely hated what it did to me, especially because it's one of those drugs where like you'll try it and you'll be like, oh, this is really nice, whatever. And but then you're going to want more. And I knew that it was really bad because like when I tried it, I ended up dreaming about it that night. And I was like, hell fucking no, bro. Like absolutely the fuck not. Like when I was like doing research into it, apparently it's like, you can like get over the physical addiction in like a couple of weeks or something, but the mental addiction on this one is like one of the strongest mental addictions, like if not the strongest on the list. And I think its capacity to ruin people's lives is like very much like top of the list. You know what I mean? So definitely stay away from that. Like for damn sure. It's just dangerous and you don't want to get hooked on something like that. And it's way too easy to get hooked on something like that. Like your example of the guy's like, oh, I just want to try it once. Do not try meth even once. Like don't, especially if you have access to it or something, like, cause then it's just, I'm telling you, dude, like with these things, your brain will find ways to justify you doing more. And you will not even realize what the fuck's going on in your head because your brain will literally be rewired to convince you that it's okay. Just a little bit more, just one hit or something. Like, no, dude, fuck that. Stay away from that shit. F tier for damn sure. Especially because it's a street drug and it could be cut with shit too.
Amen, dude. Also, who the fuck does meth anymore? Like, come on, man. Like, come on.
Yeah, dude.
There's better.
Go with the time, bro.
Yeah,
do some psychedelics, bro.
Fuck yeah.
And a quick note on that, honorable mention here, we don't have on the list is Adderall. It's pretty much just like pharmaceutical meth. Like there's like studies that show that like they gave both humans and rats like meth and Adderall and neither one could tell the difference, which I think is fucking crazy. But Adderall has its purpose for like people with ADHD. Like there are like real like studies just like showing that. But if you're going to be like abusing Adderall, like don't fucking do it either. I don't think it's worth it at all. It's not a good drug to snort either. Like it's harsh on the nose, like, and you're just going to like have a high and then crash. It won't really help you with productivity. I think studies show that like you won't actually be more productive. So if you're like a college student who's trying to use it or something like that, like it's not really worth it. The only time I've ever really seen it be used as a tool like decently is like if you're really just trying to stay up, like maybe like popping an XR, like I could see that, but you're also not really going to retain that information the way that you think you will. So like just fucking, if you're going to like stay up to cramp or something, especially like studying or something, bro, just be more prepared. Like don't fucking take Adderall. Like you don't need it. I wouldn't put it in the F tier, but honorable mention of something that we don't really endorse here.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And up next on the list, we have crack. This is one that we've decided to put in the E tier, which is actually one step up from where we had it last year.
Yeah. So crack is like, it's really just like a poor man's Coke, you know, it's just like Coke with like baking soda, which makes it a little bit worse, but I wouldn't put it on the same level as like heroin and meth. So I feel like E tier makes sense.
Yeah. I haven't tried it personally, but I've heard it's just kind of like a dumb drug. It's just like,
yeah, it's stupid.
Like there's better drugs out there, and I don't think crack will ruin your life quite as much as our F tier, but still like E tier is also like a don't do it, stay away from it. Like not good in any situation. And then next we have spice. This is one that we kept also pretty firmly in the F tier, same as last year, but for a little bit different reasons than our other F tier drugs.
Yeah, spice is just one of those like sus ass drugs that's like oftentimes like people are going to tell you it's weed and it's not, right? And like you can be tricked into like overdosing and people can die off that shit. It's just a really stupid drug. It's like really synthetic is. And like you do not want to be putting that in your body. It's just so dumb. I'm like, you know, you can go into like psychosis and shit if like you like do the wrong spice and it fucks you up. Like we had a friend who like literally had a full mental breakdown. And like, honestly, like I don't think he really ever recovered. You know what I mean? Like he like we had to like call the cops on him and shit because he smoked some spice and like he went kind of crazy. And then like, you know, he like recovered, but like he was never fully all there. Like, you know, maybe he is now years later, but like just don't fuck with that shit. It's so not worth it. Like you don't know what it's going to do to you. You don't know what's in it. And it's like literally fake as fuck. So like,
yeah, just go smoke some weed, guys.
Yeah. Like
straight
especially
up.
Nowadays, dude, in 2024, when that shit's so accessible to get real weed, like you have no excuse to be smoking spice. Nobody should be smoking spice.
Absolutely. Now up next, we've got lean. Lean is one of those drugs where I feel like it's way more fun to talk about it than to actually do it. And it's just, you know, it's kind of legendary for various reasons, you know, like hip hop and media, stuff like that. But we've kept lean in the E tier, same as last year, because it's really expensive to make and like for what it is. And Reggie, I know you've tried it and you said it's just like, it doesn't feel like
it's
a whole lot of anything.
Yeah, it doesn't feel like much. I think it's just like, I mean, I guess that's kind of the point, but like it's addictive and it's kind of dumb and it's expensive. And I think what really puts it in the E tier is that there's so much fake lean out there. You know what I mean? Like, so, you know, a lot of times when like you get lean, like you're not actually getting lean. And so, I don't know. I think you gotta evaluate risk with these things. And lean's just like kind of a dumb drug.
Oh man, like, it's not worth it. It's not worth it. It's not worth it.
Yeah.
And then joining us as our last drug in the E tier, we have just opioids as a category of drugs. And this one, like, you know, we know it as kind of a gateway drug to some harder shit like we have in our F tier for a lot of people. And what's really messed up about this one is it just really unknowingly takes hold on people just because like the history of opioids like Oxycontin is literally doctors were paid to prescribe this to as many people as they possibly could by the company that produced it. And there have been massive lawsuits about that in the decades since. But like this category of drug alone has gotten so many people addicted to opioids and worse stuff. And this is one of those drugs that can really change your brain chemistry and affect you, you know, for the rest of your life, even if you do get off of it. And this is just one where it's like I'm at a point where I wouldn't want to be prescribed opioids, like even in like a hospital for pain management.
Yeah,
I was like, just give me something else because it's scary, man. And the more we find out about this category of drugs, the more I think we're trying to, as a society, move away from it.
Yeah. And the more we realize that we don't need to be prescribing things like opioids, like to have the same effect. Like, I think we did a whole episode on it actually, about how like there's alternatives that are so much safer that will also like manage your pain just as good.
Yeah.
But
agreed.
Yeah.
Now, getting close to the end here, the next substance we have here is Xanax. This is one that is returning back to the D tier, same as last year. And I think this really rounds out my D tier as drugs that can be potentially helpful in very niche scenarios. Otherwise, I wouldn't recommend them. And for me, actually this year, I believe was possibly the first year that I actually tried Xanax. And pretty much my use case for it was that I would take a quarter of a bar, maybe half, after a night of partying, and it's like sun is up and I just want to go and get some good sleep. By taking a quarter would just really help me ramp down and get into some like comfortable sleep. And that's not even something I like to do often. And now I found some just like over the counter sleeping pills that work honestly just as well for me. But Xanax can be useful, but not something I would ever recommend recreationally. I mean, like I've seen.
And we're talking recreational use. Like people get prescribed it and stuff for like anxiety and everything. It's a little different if you're like under a doctor's supervision and like you're not abusing it. Like it has its applications, but recreationally, like I think it's D tier, dude.
Yeah, like for partying, it just makes you like a fucking zombie. You make alcohol,
you don't want that, dude. Bar tarts and shit, dude. Especially street Xanax, where it's like you don't really know exactly what's in it. And even if you do, like the dosing could be like way off, you know? I recently was given Xanax for like a surgery that I had to do since they weren't going to put me under. So they just gave me a bunch of Xanax and like all it did was just like knock me out. And like they actually had to wait for me to wake up to do the procedure. But it kind of sucked, man. Like I couldn't drive. Like, I mean, I could, but like I was on such a high dose. I guess they told me not to. And like, I've seen people like abusing it like heavily, especially people who drink, and take it. Like that's just a bad combination. You don't want to be doing that. That's when you turn into a zombie and a bar tard. But yeah, I don't know. It does have its applications. So D tier, you know?
Yeah, but don't be a bar tard. We've seen it and it's not pretty. And last, but certainly not least, we're going to end this on a high note with mushrooms edibles.
Oh, yeah.
And
S tier, baby.
That is coming back to the S tier from last year. Reason being is that I found that mushroom edibles tend to have similar effects to raw mushrooms with a little bit less downside, mostly in the way of usually it's made more from like extract or a concentrated form of psilocybin. And that way it tends to be a little bit less rough on your stomach. And so I found that can lead to me having, on average, a bit higher. And I found that on average, that's led to me having a bit more positive experiences with it. And I really appreciated that. And last year, I believe we referred to it strictly as mushroom chocolates. But now, I mean, they come in edible forms of all kinds. I mean, like I've seen gummies, we've talked about teas and different forms you get it in. So it's good to see.
Yeah, man. Like definitely one of my favorite drugs. That's like the real go-to these days because it's just so easy to like transport, to like just take, to just be consistent with, which is really important. Like, the exact dosing, you know exactly what's going to be in it. Like assuming, you're not getting some bullshit gas station mushrooms. And we're not talking about the gas station stuff here. We're talking about the real legit mushroom edibles, like actual psilocybin, not like the shit that you're going to buy at a smoke shop these days. Like that's very different. That's not even on our tier list, honestly. And I wouldn't even recommend that to anyone unless they know exactly what's in it, because that shit's kind of sus. And I tried some the other day and like it was making me like sweat and stuff. I'm like, what the fuck is in this? But yeah, we're talking about real mushroom edibles. I think they're the GOAT, dude. They're right up there with 4-ACO for me. I still prefer 4-ACO a little bit if I had to compare them, but maybe that's just because I try to keep 4-ACO a little more special.
Yeah, no, fair. I see it. Well, cool. That is our 2024 drug tier list. Just to give you a final rundown here. On the S tier, we have 5-MeO DMT, which is your traditional DMT variety. We have LSD 2CB, the actual real 2CB. We have 4-ACO DMT, and we have mushroom edibles. So you can see psychedelics overall really, really take the cake here for us.
Yeah, definitely huge fans of psychedelics here. In the A tier, we continue some of that trend with kitchen sink Tusi, or Tusi, MDMA / ecstasy. We kind of, Molly, we lumped those together, and your regular raw psychedelic mushrooms.
And then in the B tier, we've got both just weed flower that you'd smoke, as well as weed edibles. We have ketamine, and we have MDA or SAP.
Also known as Sally.
Sure.
And then in the C tier, we have Delta 8 and your other cannabinoids that are related. And then we have dabs.
Nice. And then in the D tier, we get into the things that are occasionally utilities, but we wouldn't really recommend, which are alcohol, cocaine, and Xanax.
And then in the E tier, we get into some of those drugs that we really don't recommend, which are crack, lean, and opioids.
Indeed. And then F tier, this is absolutely don't do it, stay away, steer clear. We've got heroin, crystal meth, and spice.
And lastly, in the shadow realm, the double F tier, all the way in its own section in the purple over there, we've got fentanyl, which under no condition should you be doing. We just stay away from that one. Absolutely not. Like, no go. Do not pass go. Do not collect $200. Just steer clear. Like, stay away. Stay the fuck away. Don't turn into a zombie and don't fucking die by taking that shit. So just don't fucking do fentanyl.
Nothing is bad. But that's been our tier list for the year, guys. We really hope you enjoyed this episode. Put a lot of work into it, and let us know what you think in the comments below. Do you agree with where we put everything? Where would you guys have maybe changed around some of these substances? And if there's any drugs that we didn't include here that you would like us to put here next year, we'd love to hear it and revisit that. Thank you guys for listening, and that's today's talk.
You've been listening to Modern Day Hippie. As you exit the portal, we have just one small ask of you. If you learned something new today, had a laugh, or resurfaced a drug story of your own, we want to hear about it. Drop us a comment on YouTube and show us some love on your favorite podcasting platforms. Internet algorithms really dog on us because of the topics that we discuss, so your support goes even further here than you might think. We'll catch you next week.